So it's come to my attention in a magazine that was given me by a gentleman over at the Fort Wayne Road Historical Society that was from the Chesapeake and Ohio Historical Magazine about the Allegheny. There's a lot of misconceptions as to what they did and a lot of commentary left and right about its capabilities. So I'm making a video of this most excellent article about it. Written by, well, let's see, who wrote this article? By Karen Parker. This hat here has my grandfather's pin from when he worked in the B&O as a fireman back in the 40s, and, well, he passed away in the 1950s. Would have been my mom's dad. Anyway, let's get started about the Allegheny H8 class for the Chesapeake and Ohio. Much has been written about the Chesapeake and Ohio Class H8 2666 Allegheny type locomotives, some of it full of praise even to the point of gushing, some of it critical, occasionally even contemptuous. There's no doubt that the C&O considered the locomotive a success. It bought 60 of them, even though it later took legal action against the locomotive's builder, Lyman Locomotive Works, over them. Some writers, though, have criticized the Allegheny for being too heavy for the power it produced, underutilized by the railroad, and even too timid in its design. How can we resolve this disparity of opinion? Let's begin by looking at what the C&O, Chesapeake and Ohio, the railroad that operated the Allegheny, wanted, and what the Advisory Mechanical Committee, who specified and designed the locomotive, wanted. The two were not the same performance goals. The C&O wanted a locomotive that could do the same work as its existing H7 2882 locomotives, or perhaps a bit more, but do it faster and more efficiently. As always for the C&O, it wanted an engine that could start a train from a dead stop on the steepest grade that it would encounter. The H7s were the first production, as opposed to single unit prototypes, simple articulated locomotives in North America, designed and first put in service in 1924. The Chesapeake and Ohio owned 45 of these beasts and used them exclusively on heavy coal trains over the Allegheny crossing between Hinton, West Virginia, and Clifton Forge. And here's a table of how they utilized them and their statistics. And here is the commentary down below. Sorry, it's going fast, but I don't know how long this video is going to take to make. This is a 12-page article. Right, so Clifton Forge, Virginia. On the easier graded northwest, west by road direction route from Russell, Kentucky on the Ohio River to Toledo, Ohio on Lake Erie, the H7 was a big locomotive, but its cramped appearance. But with a cramped appearance, because it had been designed to fit restrictive tunnels in the Allegheny subdivision. These tunnels were enlarged in the 1930s, removing the size restrictions and allowing for larger locomotives. The H7s were known to engine crews as dirty, meaning they made a lot of black smoke. It's an indication they were being fired at a very high rate in pounds of coal per square foot of grade area to produce enough energy to do the work required. High firing rates do produce extra heat in the firebox, but at the expense of wasting a lot of coal by blowing it out the stack before it's completely burned. Because of this, the efficiency of the locomotive was very low. By 1941, the 16-year-old H7s were showing their age and their pre-superpowered and that of their pre-superpowered design. The Chesapeake and Ohio began thinking about a new design, one more productive than the H7 by now. C&O Motive Power officials had 10 years experience with their Lima-built Class T1 210-4s used primarily between Russell, Kentucky and Toledo, Ohio. They were looking for something similar for the Allegheny crossing. The C&O at the time was part of the Van Sweringen group of railroads, along with the Nickel Plate, which is where 765 ran for, the Erie, and the Pierre Marquette, where 1225 actually, the Polar Express and sister Class to the 765. Well, they ran those engines as well. They're Berkshires, the 284s. Let me turn the page. If I can get it to turn. Sorry for the blowing if it's blowing. Here we go. And purchasing for the van swearing lines were handled by the advisory committee based in Cleveland, Ohio. The AMC's mission was to gather the best engineers from all the van's swear engine roads and then ensure they got the very best locomotive design. By the time the AMC was responsible for the design, by this time the AMC was responsible for the design of the C&O T1 210, C&O J3 484s, which is what 614 is, I do believe, and the 28, as I mentioned earlier, the 284s, the Berkshires, on the nickel plate and Pierre Marquette. Their primary goal in designing a new heavy freight engine was to create a locomotive that would meet C&O's specific needs, but that wasn't their only goal. In 1936, the Norfolk and Western had made quite a splash with its new A-Class 2664, simple articulated, especially the 6,300 horsepower it produced in testing. For whatever reason, the AMC designers wanted very badly to design a locomotive that could not only exceed that record, but smash it. This set the stage for a preliminary design for of the new C&O engine. The T1 was doing a fine job in Ohio, so it would be taken for a starting point for the new engine, but the grades on the Allegheny were twice as severe as those in Ohio, so a significantly more powerful engine would be needed. They had done this previously when designing the T1 by slide rule enlargement of the Erie 284. They designed the J3 by reproducing the proportions of the T1. This time, AMC began enlarging the T1, adding extra pair of drivers and enlarging the boiler and firebox. The result would have been a much too stiff 212-4, so it would have to be articulated given a 2664, similar in many ways to the Norfolk and Western engine, but larger. Lima had for some time been touting the use of a six-wheel trailing truck with a corresponding larger firebox and combustion chambers. Next step in superpowered design, the increased power potential of this design appealed to the AMC. The die was cast, and the new design would be a 2666, a new wheel arrangement, and one created to not only meet the needs of the C&O, but to smash the Norfolk and Western's horsepower record. Note that the AMC had not been so interested, note that if the AMC hadn't been so interested in a record-setting engine, the H8 would probably have emerged as a 2664, similar to, but larger than the Norfolk and Western A, with lower drivers and more weight. Testing the Allegheny. The story of how the Allegheny was built was covered many times. We don't need to cover it here. The story of testing of the Allegheny, on the other hand, has not been told. The C&O had a long-standing interest in testing the performance of their locomotives, and for years did so using borrowed, mainly from the nickel plate, dynamometer cars. In 1930, they bought their own dynamometer car and used it from that point until it was retired in the mid-1960s. In the summer of 1943, 8 months after the first H8 had been delivered, the C&O ran a series of detailed tests on the H8, number 1608, both over the Allegheny summit and on the line northwest of Russell, Kentucky to Columbus. And here is the two designs. You have the H7, and then you have the H8 Allegheny. And onward to Columbus, Ohio.